In the story of Korach, the Pasuk tells us in Perek Tezayin, Pasuk Chaf Alef, the Eibishter said to Moshe and Aaron, "Hibodlu mitoich Eda Zayis, remove yourself from this Eda, v'achalo eisim karaga, because now I'm going to destroy them." Continues the Pasuk Chabeis, v'yiplo panei Moshe and Aaron fall on their faces, v'yomru, and they say, "Kelo lekei haruchos l'chol basar." The Eibishter, the lekei haruchos l'chol basar. Ha'ish echad yechata. One person commits a sin about kol Eda tiksaif, and you're going to take it out on the entire Eda. You're going to exact revenge on everybody. Zok Rashi, Kelo lekei haruchos. What does that mean? Yodea machshavos. You know the mindsets of the people. Emi dosko kimidas basav adam. Your attributes, your approach, your whole essence is not the same as that of a basav adam, as an individual of flesh and blood. Melech basav adam shesarcha olav mixas medina. When you have a king of flesh and blood, where part of his country may have caused offense against him, he doesn't know who the sinner might be. Therefore, if he gets angry, he has to exact revenge against everybody. But you, in front of you, before you, all machshavos, all thoughts are known. You know precisely who the sinner is. By definition, when it comes to a melech basav adam, so when part of a community, part of a country causes offense against the king, he doesn't know who is responsible, who's not. So he exacts collective punishment. He takes it out on everybody. But the Eibishter, you know precisely who. You are a Yodei Machshavos. You know exactly who the sinner is. And therefore, why are you taking it out on the whole Eda? Says the Rebbe that at face value, what is Rashi coming to explain over here? Rashi is simply, at face value, coming to explain that normally the term ruach would mean neshama. So alekei haruchos, you would understand to mean is a term, the Eibishter, who is alekei haruchos, he's the gut of all neshamas. That's how you might assume the meaning of the words to be. Therefore, Rashi is coming along to tell you, no, over here, ruchos doesn't mean neshamas, but rather machshavos, thoughts, mindsets. Therefore, the meaning alekei haruchos, what does alekei haruchos mean? Alekim hayodea machshavos. In this particular instance, it doesn't mean the Eibishter who is the God of Neshamas, but the Eibishter who is Yodeya Machshavos. He knows what is in the mindsets of the people. And the Rebbe continues, you actually find precedent to this, where the term Ruach actually doesn't mean Neshama, but means Machshava. Where? You find precedent to this in last week's parsha of Shlach, where the mice of the Meraglim, my evet kolev ekev haisa ruach acheresimai, since he had not another neshama on him, but he had a different machshava. And there also shetevas ruach anemar bo inyana machshava. There also the term ruach means machshava. He had a different mindset, a mindset different to that of the rest of the Meraglim. So you see that the term ruach can also mean machshava, and Rashi is coming to emphasize the point over here as well, that when it says alekei haruchos, it means yodei machshavos. And the proof to this is because only because this is the only way the sequence of the wording in the pasuk actually makes sense. Now the flow of alekei haruchos makes sense with that which is said immediately afterwards. Since you are Kelo lekei haruchos, you know the machshavos of people. Therefore, on that basis, one person is going to sin. In other words, and you know who that person is, because you are Yedei Machshavos, Val Kol Edo Tiksoif. And as the Rebbe continues, Kilafisha Kadosh Baruch Hu Yedei Machshavos, since Eibishter is Lekei Haruchos, which means he is Yedei Machshavos, Harehu Yedei Mihu Achaita Val Miliksoif. So he knows precisely who is the official offender, who is the main person who sinned, and therefore against whom to become angry. But obviously, if we were to translate the meaning of alekei haruchos, as we might otherwise typically assume, just the got of neshamas, then that wouldn't flow. It doesn't make sense. Because then it wouldn't make sense. There's no connection between referencing the Eibishter as alekei neshamas and then making the point one person sins and you're going to get angry against everybody. But if you translate alekei haruchos, meaning yodei machshavos, you know who is that one person, so why get angry against everybody? And therefore the Rebbe continues, Rashi mamshich. That's why it makes sense that Rashi follows on and continues and stresses. You're not like a melech basav adam. Aval ata, etc. V'yadea ata mi'achaita. You know. You are Yodei Machshavos, and you know who is the one who sinned. Which means, in other words, the way we're explaining now, that Alekei Haruchais means Yodei Machshavos. It means that you know the mindset of people. In other words, Rashi is bringing the conversation afterwards of saying, you're not like a Melech Basav Adam. A Melech Basav Adam doesn't know who the precise sinner is, but you do know who the precise sinner is. So that all flows, and Rashi is looking to substantiate the flow and the sequence in the pasuk. That Kel Alekei Haruchais, the Eibishter, who is Yodei Machshavos, Ha'ish Echad Yechata, unlike a Melech Basav Adam. In regard to yourself, one person sins because you'll know who that person is. You're going to be angry at everybody. A Melech Basav Adam Melech, but not you. So that's why Rashi brings it like this, in order to better explain the flow and the understanding of what the Perush of Ruchais actually means. But then the Rebbe begins with a whole sequence of questions. The Rebbe says we need to understand a number of seeming problems with Rashi. Number one, Alef, Lama Rashi lahasbir hadavar. Why does Rashi have to come to explain the matter? Simple question. If Rashi wants to emphasize the fact that Alekei Haruchais means exactly that, Yodei Machshavos, then why doesn't Rashi just stop there, tell us exactly in the Lashon as Rashi says, Kel Alekei Haruchais Yodei Machshavos, you are a Yodei Machshavos, and therefore you know precisely who the sinner is, and therefore exact punishment against the individual. Why is Rashi bringing this whole added mashal of Melech Basav Adam when it comes to a king of Basav Adam, so he doesn't know, etc., etc., and therefore he has to exact collective punishment? But what is Rashi adding by bringing in this whole detailed comparison of a Melech Basav Adam to that of the Eibishter? The point can be made even without bringing that in. That's question number one. Question number two, base. If for whatever the reason there is some added purpose and meaning and explanation by bringing in this mashal, Rashi, which is right, Rashi brings it. Why doesn't Rashi actually bring this same analogy earlier on in the Torah, in Pashas Vayera? What happened in Pashas Vayera? B'tainas Avraham Avinu. When Avraham Avinu brought his own complaint or his own taina against the Eibishter, Hadaima l'chaylo l'tainas Moshe b'inyanenu b'meila gam sham masin l'havi moshe. When Avraham Avinu is challenging the Eibishter in regards to saving Sodom and Amorah, and Avraham Avinu then says, Af tispet tzadikim rasha, which is somewhat similar to what Moshe Rabbeinu's taina is over here as well to the Eibishter. In other words, you're going to issue collective punishment. And Abraham is asking the same thing. You're going to destroy the whole city, maybe the tzaddikim in the city. So this same mashal, as brought over here, Melech Basav Adam doesn't know and therefore has to exact punishment against everybody, but you do know. So take out your anger, your wrath, your punishment against those specific sinners in the city of Sodom. In other words, so the question that Rebbe asks is that this mashal brought over here makes as much sense, seemingly, to be brought over there in the story of Avraham Avinu as well. But so why doesn't Rashi, for argument's sake, bring this same mashal over there to emphasize the same point? Question number three. Even when it comes to a regular king, if he's a normal king, if he's a king who rules with yosher, with fairness and justness, when one person commits a sin and there are only a select few sinners, a normal king, not a dictator, but a king who rules with yosher and tzidkus, he's not going to go ahead and exact revenge against everybody. He'll go and appoint somebody and judges to go and do their research extensively to determine who the guilty parties are. And even if it becomes impossible to determine precisely who the offenders are, it still requires some clarification. Just because a king, a just king, a righteous king, a fair king, cannot ascertain who the precise sinner is, the individual who sinned, Yanish Melech Yasher Haylech Es Kulam. Is a king, a normal king, going to go ahead and start exacting revenge against everybody? So in other words, even in the mashal itself, the Rebbe is asking a broader question. When you say Melech Basav Adam, a normal king, a regular king, a Basav Adam, will not be able to ascertain who is the precise offender when some people offended, but not everybody. He'll go and exact revenge against everybody. No, that's not true. A normal king who rules with Sichos, a king who rules with Yashrus, is not going to exact revenge against everybody. He will determine in the first instance who the offenders are. And even if he can't determine who the offenders are, nevertheless, he's not going to necessarily go ahead and exact revenge against everybody. So the Rebbe is raising a question here in the very mashal of Rashi itself. Question number 4. Pasach Rashi Belosha and Sircha Olav Mixas Medino Messiah Belosha Miha Chayta. So Rashi, the Rebbe is asking another question, again in the actual mashal. The Rebbe says, Melech Bosa Bedom Shesarcha Olav Mixas Medina. You have a king of flesh and blood where some of the community, some of the country caused offense. Sarcha. And then the Rashi continues and says, he doesn't know who the sinner is. Why is Rashi changing the language in the first instance, sarcha, which also implies some form of sin, but it's more having caused general offense, having created a stench, etc., and then switches and says, but he doesn't know who the precise sinner is. In other words, why is there an inconsistency in the actual language? Rashi should have said, Melech Basav Adam Shechotu Olav Mixas Medina. That if part of the community sinned against him, or, if you want, then change it the other way. Melech Basav Adam Shesarcha Olav Mixas Medina. You have a Melech Basav Adam against whom some of the Medina were Sarcha caused offense. And Yedea Miha Sereach, or Miha Sarchan. He doesn't know who the Sarchan is. So why does Rashi switch the language from Sarcha to Chayte? Why is there an inconsistency in the language? Question number 5. Hey. Kain Messiahim Rashi Eni Yedea Miha Chayte Loshin Yochid Utloika Psicha Shesarcha Olav Mixas Medina. So the Rashi was asking another question. Because in the language of the Moshel of Rashi, Sarcha Olav Mixas Medina means that some of the Medina, some of the country, but clearly a group of people, caused offense against the king. But then says, he doesn't know who the chayte, singular, who the sinner is. What it should have again said, for whatever the reason that Rashi changed up the language, but it should have said, who are the sinners. If Sarcha Olav Mixas Medina, if part of the community, but it's more than one, caused offense, then he doesn't know who the sinners are. Why miachayta? Why does Rashi switch from a Lashon Rabim later to a Lashon Yachid? Then the Rebbe continues. So Rashi, the Rebbe continues quoting from the next Rashi, and the next Rashi quotes from the Pasuk, Ish Echad, one person commits a sin. So Rashi says, one person, he is the sinner. And you, you're going to get angry against everybody. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter says, Yafa Amarta, you're saying good, you're right, you've spoken well. I know, and I will make known who it is that sinned and who did not sin. So here again, the Rebbe asks a number of questions. There are a number of questions that need to be asked over here as well. Number 1, Alef. First of all, what is Rashi B'chlal coming to? What is his intent? What's Rashi coming to be meisiv in his explanation over here? In other words, the pasuk says, one person sinned, and Rashi adds in the words, he's the one who sinned. And then adds in the words, and you, upon the entire community, are going to get angry. In other words, there's nothing added here to the pasuk. The pasuk itself says, one person sins, you're going to be angry against the whole Eidah. So the pasuk itself is perfectly clear. What is Rashi adding over here by saying, he's the sinner, and you, that's the question. What is Rashi being meisiv in these words? He is the one who sinned. Well, that's obvious from the lashon of the pasuk itself. And then va'ata, and you al kol eidah tiksayv. Again, al kol eidah tiksayv makes it clear you Eibishter are going to get angry on the whole eidah. So what is Rashi adding in the word va'ata and you? And then the Rebbe continues, Beis, V'im kavanas Rashi, for whatever the reason, Rashi's intent is lafarish be'ezeh from shehu, mashakosa ish echad yechta v'gam v'kol eidah tiksayv. So if, for whatever the reason, Rashi is bringing in all this extra wording over here, nevertheless, why doesn't Rashi in the Dibur HaMaschil itself also bring in the words Val Kol Eidah Tiksayf? In other words, it says Ha'ish Echad. One person will sin. So then Rashi says Hu Achaita. But then Rashi continues and says Va'ato Al Kol Eidah Tiksayf. So Rashi's adding in something over here or alluding to something extra, and you Al Kol Eidah Tiksayf. But then Rashi should have brought the words of the pasuk Val Kol Eidah Tiksayf in the Dibur HaMaschil, or at the very least alluded to them by saying Ha'ish Echad V'Goymar. Question number 3. Mahi kavanas Rashi b'zeh shemaisif ha'inyan. Furthermore, what is the intent of Rashi when he's adding in further an extra emphasis here in the Rashi? Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Rebbe said Yafa Marta. You've answered. You've said well. You've spoken well. Ani yodea ma'dia mi chata mi lo chata. I know, and I'll make known who sinned, who didn't sin. Again, why does Rashi add in this extra anecdotal emphasis about how the Eibishter responded to Moshe? What's the significance in doing so? Furthermore, in that in itself, Dalet b'mayla l'tainas Moshe, in response to the complaint or the time of Moshe, Omar Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, the Eibishter said, Ha'olu misovev l'mishkan Korach dasan v'avira. Remove yourself from the surrounds of the Mishkan, and take yourself away from Korach dasan v'avira. And the pasuk emphasizes clearly that now the punishment was brought to all three of them. In other words, not just to Korach, but to Dasan and Abiram as well. So the Rebbe says, if that's the case, then again, what Rashi is saying doesn't quite shtim, doesn't follow. Rashi says that the Eibishter responded to Moshe and said, you're speaking well. In other words, the Eibishter is maskim to that which Moshe Rabbeinu is complaining and says, one person sinned. But Rashi even emphasizes the point. Yechta, one person sinned. In other words, Rashi is telling us over here that the Eibishter concurs with Moshe's taina, and actually says to him, Yafa Marta, you're actually making a very good point. You, Moshe, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's point? One person committed a sin, and you know who that one person is. So why take it out on everybody? And then Rashi tells us that the Eibishter is saying, Yafa Marta, you're right. What do you mean you're right? Clearly Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't right, because Moshe Rabbeinu says, one person sinned. But as we see afterwards from the pasuk itself, the Eibishter told Moshe Rabbeinu to remove himself because he was intending to punish Korach, Dasan, and Abiram. Not one person who sinned, but clearly three people who sinned. And next question that Rebbe asks is again in the wording of Rashi. Ani yodea l'chayra miyusar ki achidashu rak ba'ani, my dia. B'frashi Rashi, Moshe said, aloshan ha-medrash yodea. In other words, that the medrash itself says that the Eibishter answered Moshe Rabbeinu and said, Yafa Marta, you're saying well. Ani yodea, I know. And then Rashi adds in, umaydia, and I will make known mi chata, chata, who sinned and who didn't sin. Why is it necessary to emphasize the point, ani yodea, I know? The real chiddush here is ani yodea, I'm going to make known now who did sin and who didn't sin. So why is Rashi adding in the words, ani yodea, I know who did sin and who didn't sin? What's the significance in adding that point in? The Medrash itself only stops him by saying Madia. So Rashi is Maisiv, the Loshan of the Rashi is adding in the words Ani Yodea. The Medrash itself, Ani, it says Ani Madia Michata Milechata. I'm going to make known who sinned and who didn't sin. Rashi adds in the words and says Ani Yodea, I know and I will make known who sinned and who didn't sin. Why add in the point I know? That's something Rashi's adding in extra above what is quoted in the Medrash, and it begs the question why. And then the Rebbe, in order to answer all of these questions, asks a much more general and all-encompassing question. There's a broader general question we need to consider over here. בפסוקים הקודמים נזכר כמה פעמים שמחלוקת קרח על משה ואהרון השתתפו אנשים רבים. What is perfectly clear from all of the earlier psukim in this argument, in this machlokes between Korach against Moshe and Aaron, it wasn't just Korach. Obviously, there were a number directly involved. As it says over there, Vayakumu, Vanoshim b'nei Yisrael chamishim u'masayim, they got up collectively. 250 people were involved. Yikohalu, they all gathered on Moshe vel Aaron the Gemar. Moshe diber al Korach vel kol adosei. Moshe responds not just to Korach, but to the whole Eidah that are assembled with him. Vayichiach gam es kol adosei, his whole Eidah. And he even emphasizes the point, Moshe Rabbeinu. And he says, not just you, but kol adoscha, all of the people together with you that are assembled with you who are now challenging and raising a revolt against the Eibishter. Ubeperish Rashi, and Rashi over there actually even says, this is already their fourth offense, or fourth collective revolt. Chotu be'egel. They sinned by the egel, etc., etc. In other words, there's reference to the fact that they committed earlier offenses. And again, then it wasn't one person, it was collectively. So Moshe Rabbeinu was continuously talking to Korach and making reference not just to he himself, but other people who are committing this offense together with him. The Torah itself attests to the fact that it wasn't just Korach himself, but V'kohalu, a whole bunch of other people were joining together with him. If that's the case, there wasn't just one person involved in this machlokes. Even according to Moshe Rabbeinu's own understanding. After all, he himself says, doesn't just make reference to Korach, but says your whole Eidah. And he makes reference to previous offenses. This is the fourth time where it was collectively a bunch of people involved, not just one person. So why is Moshe Rabbeinu now in his taina to the Eibishter saying, one person is committing the sin and you're going to be angry against everybody? You know yourself it's not just one person. You've yourself already addressed a number of people who are involved in this sin. Says the Rebbe of Abir B'Kol Zes, the explanation is as follows. When it says in the Pasuk that Korach gathered against them, Rashi says, Holach Eisel Ashpatim. Opita Oisam, Kasvurim Atem, Shalai Levadi Ani Makbid, Any Makbid Elo B'Shvil Kulchem. Ad Shinispetu Kulam. In other words, Rashi already tells us earlier on that when it says V'yikol Alem Korach, that when Korach gathered them, how did he gather them? So Rashi tells us he went to the other Shvatim and he seduced them and he said to them, you think that I'm only being makbid, I'm only particular, I'm only concerned about my own kavod over here. I'm here defending all of your honor. You're all being slighted over here by what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing with all of these appointments. Until in fact they all get taken in by Korach's arguments and join him in the revolt. Hainu, in other words, Korach is the rabble-rouser here. He is the one who is seducing them with his words. He's drawing them in with his words. He's convincing them that it's his intention and he's concerned about their well-being and their spiritual welfare, etc., etc. And he convinces them to join him with complaints against Moshe and Aaron. And the same is regarding the others, the other heads who have been joining in leading this actual revolt. In other words, there were a lot of people who got caught up in this revolt. It was Korach in the first instance. Then he draws in Dasan and Aviram who lead him in this revolt, and then by extension altogether another 250, etc. Like Rashi himself explains, since it was the Shevet of Reuven that was encamped right next to the family of Kahos. From Reuven came Dasan and Aviram, and from Kahos came Korach. And since they were side by side, Reuben shel hareish nun ish sharoi, and most of the 250 people that joined in the revolt were also there from Shevet Reuven. They were neighbors to Kahos and his family and the children that, or in other words, the family of Kohos that were settled over there. They joined because they were neighbors. Dasan and Aviram and most of the other 250 people were neighbors to Kohos and his family, and that's why they joined, as Rashi notes, woe to the Rasha himself and woe to his neighbor. So because they were the near neighbors, so Korach was deliberately looking to convince them and to seduce them with his words and to draw them in until eventually they bought into his claim to a point of where they said, you know what, you're right. But were it not for the fact that Korach initiated this whole conversation and started to draw them in the first instance, they would never have become a part of this whole rabble-rousing gang. So by definition, it's true that Dasan and Aviram also became ringleaders in this revolt. And it's true that there were 250 people altogether. And most of them came from Shevet Reuven, but only because they were shchenim, they were neighbors to the Bnei Kohos in the first instance, where Korach himself was, who then exploited and took the opportunity of looking to lure his neighbors into his claims, into his arguments, whereby in the end, they buy into the claim, they join him in the actual revolt. Now it says the Rebbe, it's never an excuse for anybody to be able to use this, it's not my fault, to use this justification. Somebody else convinced me, somebody else seduced me into the sin. It's never an excuse for you to be able to say that I committed this avera only on account of the fact that somebody else convinced me to do this avera. That doesn't work. First of all, like we said, so stay away from the Rasha in the first instance, so you don't put yourself at risk of somebody else drawing you into doing an avera. And moreover, besides the fact that even if for whatever the reason you are next to somebody who is going to try and offer you these negative ideas, you still have to strengthen yourself to be able to resist the temptations, etc. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, the bottom line remains, however, that although it's no excuse for them, and Lamaisa, that's what happened, they themselves endured punishment. But in the first instance, they only came into this sin as a direct result of Korach. He remains the primary rabble-rouser. He is this single one responsible. That's why Rashi deliberately brings this mashal to emphasize the point. A mashal of a melech basar adam, of a king of flesh and blood, shesarcha olav mixas medina. Rashi changes the language over here and says, part of his country caused offense. In other words, to emphasize that their behavior created a stench. It caused offense. In a way that was disgusting to the king. Like the literal translation of sarcha, which means like a stench. Not that they in the first instance set out with intent to actually rebel against the king. In a manner that whereby they should deserve death as a result. In other words, Rashi is looking to make the point that the country, or part of it, some of the countrymen, sarcha, they caused offense to the king. They caused a stench. The king is disgusted by their behavior. But ultimately, it was only sarcha. They didn't set out in the first instance to actually rebel against the king. Since some of the countrymen did cause offense, since some of the countrymen did get involved in causing offense to the king, there will have likely been at least one person amongst them who led that revolt in the first instance, who caused them to, and led them into creating and causing this offense against the king in the first place. There's always going to be what we call a ringleader. So therefore, Rashi is looking to emphasize the point over there. So he's the real sinner. He's the real rebel. He's the one who's being murdered b'malchus, who's rebelling against the kingdom. And that's why Rashi changes up the language and changes it from Lashon Rabim to Lashon Yochid. By definition, that Sarcha Olav Mixas Medina. Part of the countrymen, some of the countrymen indeed caused offense, and they created a stench, and the king is angry against them. Any Aden, a Melech Basav Adam, it doesn't know Mi'u Achaita, who is the original sinner, who's the key rabble-rouser, who's the ringleader, who's the one who led them to causing this offense. Because that ringleader, he's the one who's the real Meired B'Malchus, he's the real rebel. He's the one who's deserving of death. But since the king doesn't know who the ringleader is, he's dealing collectively with all of those who got involved in causing the offense. That's why Rashi says, don't know who the sinner is in the singular. The one who's caused the whole broader revolt. But that's the point. The Anshe Medina, you can't call them actual outright chaitim, outright sinners. There is offense, there is a stench, but they are not the very deliberate sinners who set out in the first instance to directly rebel and revolt against the actual king. Since when it comes to a Melech Basav Adam and he doesn't know who the ringleader is, so he exacts punishment against all of them that are involved. Because Lamaisa, at the end of the day, they're all involved in creating and causing offense. But you, Rebbeinu Shalom, you Eibishter, you know all the machshavas. The idea you know precisely who the main and primary ringleader is. If so, therefore, that's Moshe Rabbeinu's taina. The rest who have directly been involved in causing offense, and yes, Moshe Rabbeinu is aware, it's not just Korach, it's Dasan, it's Aviram, it's 250 people. In other words, he acknowledged, he kept on saying the Eidah, he kept on acknowledging that there were more than one, there was more than one. But that doesn't take away from the fact that you, Eibishter, you know Miachaita, you know who the ringleader is. The rest of them, arguably, are sarchu. They're also, therefore, like the countrymen who have caused broader offense, but are not the primary rebels creating the initial revolt. So therefore, Moshe's taina about leaving everybody else alone and just go after Korach. So that's why Rashi makes this clear and explains it in the wording of the pasuk. That's why Rashi makes the point. When Rashi makes the emphasis in the second Rashi over there, that's why Rashi brings the language, one person is responsible. He's the one who sinned. He's the one who caused the offense. He's the one responsible. He is the ringleader. That's what Rashi is looking to add in over the words of the pasuk. And that's what Rashi continues over there. The rest of the nation only caused general offense. But you, who knows the machshavos of everybody, bit me up. You're going to get angry against everybody. So that's why Rashi is adding over here in the second Rashi, he's the one, he's the ringleader. And you who are Yodei Machshavos, this is as a continuation of the previous Rashi, Al Koleida Tiksa, if you're going to get angry against everybody, you know who the singular ringleader is. And then the Rebbe continues, however, and says, in response to Moshe's taina, which is a valid taina, the Eibishter responds and says, Yafa Amarta, you're speaking well. In other words, the Eibishter says, Yafa Marta, you speak well. In principle, you're right. In other words, in principle, you are absolutely right. That generally speaking, the punishment should be exacted primarily against the key ringleader, the chayte, the sinner. And not Elu Shesarchu, not others who got involved later on, got drawn in and created a broader offense and a stench as a result of their behavior. Ulam benegel prat, but that might be in principle. But in practice, praktisch gerät, in this particular instance, sagt der Eibishter, ein adava k'moshe Moshe haya yodeya v'sovar shayachai echad, ela sha'ani yodeya. It's not the what you think, Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not what you know. That's Korach himself who is the primary ringleader. And that's why Rashi adds in other words over there, sha'ani yodeya, I know who the primary ringleaders are. Umaydia michata, and I will let you know who the sinners are. Shaloi Korach bilvad chata lagam dosen v'aviram chata. It wasn't just Korach himself, but it was also dosen and aviram. Mashenken sharedo as opposed to everybody else. V'zeo shamar kodesh baruch hu. That's what the Eibishter said. Hel u'misav l'mishkan Korach dosen v'aviram ki shloshtam chaytim he. So Moshe Rabbeinu was effectively telling the Eibishter to recognize the reality that it's just Korach and not everybody else. The Eibishter is telling him, in principle, your approach is right. The punishment should only ever be exacted against the primary sinner and not others who maybe get seduced into the actual sin. Nevertheless, I know, that word that Rashi is adding in over here, over and above the Medrash, that it's not just Korach himself, that it's also Dasan and Avira. And therefore, my dear, I will make it known to you as well, Michata, who sinned. And that's why the pasuk continues and tells that they're telling us that the Eibishter tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Helu misav l'mishkan Korach dasan v'avira. And that therefore explains what Rashi is really coming to emphasize over here, first with his change of language, also from Lashon Yachid from Lashon Rabbim to Lashon Yachid, why he brings the whole mashal in the first instance, why in the second Rashi again adds in the emphasis, Hu achaita v'ata al kol eda, etc. Then the Rebbe goes on and says, Ha'yirah b'avodas adam. That's now understanding beautifully what Rashi is really coming to communicate insofar as what Moshe was really taining to the Eibishter and what the Eibishter is responding to Moshe Rabbeinu. But insofar as the lesson and the takeaway for all of us is concerned, the Parsha B'chlal tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu sent to Dosan and Aviram. They obviously, as we know, refused to come to Moshe Rabbeinu, and they answered with incredible chutzpah back to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not enough. You took us out of Mitzrayim to take us and kill us in the desert. You're going to gouge out our eyes, etc., etc. Till a point where Moshe himself became furious. All of that conversation, all of the behavior of Dasan and Aviram, even as Moshe summoned them to try and make peace with them, by their response to Moshe with such incredible chutzpah, we see blatantly that they were not like the rest of Sarchu, where they just got drawn into it, but rather Ela Shechaitim Hayu, they themselves were absolute sinners. They themselves were directly involved. They themselves were as much ringleaders and responsible as Korach himself. Notwithstanding the incredible chutzpah that Dasan and Aviram demonstrated to Moshe, which blatantly illustrates how they themselves are also real ringleaders over here, still, Moshe Rabbeinu is being done l'kaf schus. He's still putting emphasis on only one man. Korach, it's undeniable. Korach was, in the first instance, the absolute ringleader. It becomes clear afterwards that Dasan and Aviram are ringleaders as well. Still, Moshe Rabbeinu is done l'kaf schus. Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Eibishter, Ha'ish echad yachto. There's still just the one man. In other words, Korach. You know, you're Yodei Machshavos. It's Korach himself who is the sinner over here. He's leaving Dasan and Aviram out of the equation. He's still, notwithstanding their incredible chutzpah, being done l'kaf schus. From here we see how much every single one of us, without exception, because the Rebbe says, as it says in Tanya, every single one of us has some aspect, some element of Moshe Rabbeinu within us. To thoroughly inculcate yourself and make it as part of your actual nature. To judge somebody else l'kaf schus. Even if the other person's behavior is such where there seems to be absolutely no redeeming factor. They behave in such an extreme way, with azus, with such extreme chutzpah, where it's so clear that they're setting out to rebel and to revolt. Nevertheless, he has a responsibility to still seek out, as Moshe Rabbeinu did in regard to Dosan and Aviram, schus, merit, something, find some saving grace within them. Because when you are able to find actual saving grace in the other person, then you can still work with that person and you will be able to then steer that person. If you give up on the person, if you find there's no limit schus for him whatsoever, then achin vei. But if you see that Moshe Rabbeinu himself is willing to be malamet schus for Dosan and Aviram, ho'ish echad yechata, and give them a pass and hopefully save them in the process, how much more so do we each have to ensure to do the same when it comes to engaging with other people? We never reserve the right to write other people off. You know, when it says, Havidonas kol adam lekaf schus, the emphasis is very clear. It's kol ha'adam, the whole person. You have to look at the totality of the individual. You don't know the whole picture. And like it says, the Mishnah tells us, don't judge another person until you're actually standing in their place. What does it actually mean, in his place? Simply put, it means until you have the same circumstances, you're in the same circumstances as the other individual. But Chassidus actually tells us at a much deeper level that even if you have the same set of given circumstances as the other person, you don't know the makeup of his neshama. And unless you are of an identical disposition, how can one neshama possibly judge another neshama? Our tafkid, our missions in life are not the same. Why is somebody failing when we are not failing? Because that's his or her area of vulnerability. And we're not vulnerable in that same specific area. The Eibishter sent every neshama into this world with unique koiches and also unique challenges. And my challenges are not your challenges and your koiches are not my koiches. And success, therefore, is only an achievement for the neshama with the challenge. There's nothing remarkable about being able to walk, but it is an achievement for a crippled man to be able to walk. For a person who is not crippled to compare his walking to a man on crutches is not only inappropriate, it's foolish. In other words, we criticize other people because we make a judgmental decision about that person's inability to function in a certain area in comparison to our ability to function in the same given situation. How unfair is that? It's like expecting a 6-year-old to be able to lift up a suitcase because it's not heavy for us as an adult. So a fundamental problem with people's inability to deal with one another's failings is that they're measuring those failings against their own strengths. The only true judge is Ke'el Lekei Haruchais. The Eibishter is the Yodei Machshavos. He knows with which strengths and with which weaknesses each neshama began. As for the rest of us, it remains a fundamental responsibility to always recognize and appreciate the uniqueness of every neshama and to reach out accordingly. It's a very different kind of Gimmel Tammuz this year. Many of us who would otherwise be at the Oihel may not have the opportunity on account of the current global situation. However, as the Rebbe taught us time and again, every obstacle opens doors and every challenge enables us to expose latent potential. And if there's one catchphrase that's being bantered about at present, it's new normal. We are emerging from our collective lockdown and we're entering into a new normal. What does that really mean? And how does that translate into our lives? Befrat as Chassidim. Well, if you think about it, these past few months have engendered a paradigm shift in society. We've all suddenly become acutely aware of our vulnerability. We all come to recognize that no matter how powerful or how influential or how rich we think we are, it's not about you. It's not, nor was it ever koichi v'oisim yadi, but rather yesh balabayis labirazu. There's someone or something rather in charge of this world, and I have to yield to that reality. All of a sudden, we're thrust into this whole new set of circumstances where we find ourselves operating on a different level and awareness of the fact that we are not in control. And that awareness in itself has to engender a greater, more compelling achdus than ever before. You know, in Parshas Ba'aloscha, we read the other week, we're told how the the Onon, the cloud was hovering over the Mishkan, and when it was hovering, they stopped, and when it moved on, they traveled, and sometimes for a day, and sometimes for a week, and sometimes for a year. What's with all the emphasis about the cloud? And telling us, furthermore, whenever they stopped, they would assemble the Mishkan. Whenever they would have to travel, they would disassemble the Mishkan, etc., etc. Al pi Hashem yachanu v'al pi Hashem yiso. They traveled by the word of Hashem, and they rested by the word of Hashem. A simple question. Again, what's with all the talk of the cloud, the travels, the rest stops? Why is all of that so relevant? More precisely, isn't there something of a paradox? It's one thing to say they traveled by the word of Hashem. But what's Al Pi Hashem Yachanu? They rested by the word of Hashem. You're tired. Everybody wants to rest at some point or another. When the Eibishter says it's time to move on, then it's time to move on. Al Pi Hashem Yiso. But why Al Pi Hashem Yachanu? Surely that's something that they would want to do of their own accord. But the point is this. They're on the way to Eretz Yisrael. This is still before the Ma'asim Meraglim. They don't want to stop. They want to keep marching forward. There's no time to rest, not when their ultimate destiny is beckoning. So indeed, they have to stop and they have to rest, Al Pi Hashem, by the Eibishter's directive. But if that's the case, then why is it Al Pi Hashem Yiso? That they're traveling by the word of Hashem. They want to travel. They want to keep going. But think about it. At some point or another, the Eibishter is going to tell them to stop. And then they have to do so, much as they may not want to. They have to suddenly assemble the Mishkan. And then a day later, it's time to move on again, and they have to disassemble the Mishkan. No sooner had they put it all together, and the Pasuk tells us they have to suddenly take it all apart. It's quite an arduous task. And the point is, and as it is every bit as relevant to us today, the stops and the starts of life are entirely dictated by the Eibishter, as we can readily see. The challenge for us, as defined by the Rebbe time and again, is that wherever you are, wherever that stop is, be sure to build your Mishkan. Make that place a Dira La Yisparech. Reach out to somebody else, find another Yid, make a difference in somebody else's life. You do that, you build that Mishkan in particular through Ahavas Yisrael, through reaching out to another. There's a very famous Yalkut Shemaini that we're familiar with. It tells us how at the beginning of time, when they started already being Eibid Avodah Zarah, there were two Malachim, Shemchazai and Azel, who suggested to the Eibishter they could do a better job, forget humanity, send us down below. The Eibishter told them, you're going to mess up. They insist, no, we won't. The Eibishter sends them down, and of course, they become utterly corrupt. Fast forward many years to the story of the Meraglim, as we read this past Shabbos, when the Meraglim come back with their report on Eretz Yisrael. And then they make reference and they say, amongst them, besides the giant fruit and the big cities and everything else, they also make reference to the Nephilim. Who are these Nephilim? So Chazal tell us these Nephilim are the offspring of Shemchazai and Azal. So the Rebbe asks a question: why is it relevant? Why is it necessary to have to bring them in as well? Why are you talking about the Nephilim? You make enough of an impact to achieve your objective by saying that the cities were fortified with tsurais and there were giant men and mammoth fruits, etc., etc. So why the necessary added emphasis of the Nephilim? And the Rebbe explains, because it's Yadu, it's known that the whole reason why, as the Alter Rebbe says in Likkutei Torah, they wanted to create all of this fear is so that they can remain in the Midbar, where they won't have any of the Daigas HaParnasa. They won't have to be Isaac. They won't have to get themselves involved in the land. They can stay in the Midbar and they can bask in the Ruchnias all of the time. And that's why they bring the emphasis to the Nephilim as well. Because they're saying, you see what happens when even a Malach comes here and chooses to get involved in the Gashmias of this world, they become corrupted. The Gashmias overwhelms. They lose their Ruchnias Dika anchor. The reference to the Nephilim was deliberately intended to further validate their claim. But a mistake it was, a big mistake. Because where Malachim fail, a chassid and any yid can always succeed. Malachim are oimdim, srafim oimdim imal. They're stagnant. They have very limited ruchniistic capacity. A yid is constantly moving, going, growing. And the spiritual opportunities are endless. Consider the words, as the Rebbe points out, of Yeshua and Kalev in their counterclaim to the Meraglim. Im chafetz Hashem bonu. If the Eibishter desires us, he will bring us into the land. The Rebbe says, Chafetz Hashem bonu. It wasn't if, but in other words, they were emphasizing, the Eibishter desires us. He gave us unique kaiches with which to be able to make a difference in our surrounds and to our fellow Yidden. Make our difference in our slice of the world, transform this world, make it a Dider La Yispareh. Im Chafetz Hashem bonu, the Eibishter desires us, not Malachim. That's why he's bringing us to this land. Because the Yid's ability to be attuned, Baruchnius, to be spiritually attuned, even while engaging with this Gashmiistic world, is incomparably greater to any of that of a Malach. And again, at no time has this reality become more obvious than in the present. Chazal tell us very categorically, the reason for Korban Bayis Sheni was on account of Sinas Chinam. People consciously choosing to isolate from one another. 2,000 years of Golas. I think it's fair to say that we've redressed much of the balance. Yes, there's a Faribel here and a Bregas over there, but by and large, we tend to be getting along with one another. Maybe there's still some rough edges that need to be sanded out. Comes along the Yetzer Hara in the guise of COVID-19 and seeks to force isolation upon us, to separate parents from children, friends from one another. So even as we may no longer be looking, chas v'sholom, to isolate others, we're being forced to self-isolate. But the Yetzer Hara is losing. He's losing because we have been connecting in ways like never before. Malachim, angels, they can't do that, but we can, and we do. There has been such a unique outpouring of chesed and demonstration of achdus. Somebody said to me on Shabbos, let's have a socially distant Farbrengen. I said to him, social distance and Farbrengen is an oxymoron. But l'maisa, we don't see this obstacle as a stumbling block, rather as a stepping stone. This is the Rebbe's enduring message in these sorts of predicaments. Don't be a malach, be a human being, be a mensch. My father, Olav Shalom, once went by the Rebbe for dollars on a Sunday with my nephew, with his grandson in his hands. And the Rebbe looked to my father and he said, "For was hab ich im Nächten nicht gesehen bei Verbrengen?" I didn't see him yesterday by the Verbrengen. My father smiled, thinking that the Rebbe was making like small talk and he started to move away. And the Rebbe called him back and repeated himself. "For was hab ich im Nächten nicht gesehen bei Verbrengen?" My father kind of shrugged and left it at that. When he got home later, he asked my nephew's mother, my sister, my father's daughter, and she said, "It's true. I normally always bring him for some of the time to the Farbrengen, only yesterday he wasn't feeling very well, so I didn't bring him." Could you imagine? 5,000 people, 2,000 people, even just hundreds, and there's one 2-year-old kid. And the Rebbe sees him, and the Rebbe knows that he's there, and the Rebbe knows when he's not there. Could you imagine what an important lesson that is for all of us? Have you done as kol adam lekafskos? You walk into shul on a Shabbos morning, and there's a couple of hundred people there, or maybe only a few dozen. In fact, maybe just a minyan. There's always the one you go to that you make a point of saying hello to, and there's always those who you don't talk to, that you don't speak to, unless maybe they're sitting in your seat. You barely necessarily acknowledge the fact that they exist. If they weren't there for 1 week, would you necessarily be the wiser? But the Rebbe is telling us, he's there, he's leading, he's speaking for hours, and still he sees and he knows who's in the room and who's not, regardless of the size of the crowd. We have to be don lekafskos, no matter who we might be inclined not to want to talk to. We have to be Rebbes to others. Be aware of them. Acknowledge them. Zoga gut Shabbos. Be nice. Open your hearts. Sometimes you have no idea what that does for their esteem or for their neshama. Final thought. A maternal relative of my father moved into Crown Heights sometime in the late 50s. It was Chai Elul. The yeshiva had off that night, and so my father went to visit these relatives. And when he was there, he came across a big square box with an antenna on top, transmitting a comedy show. Television was a rarity in those days by anyone, let alone by a Fruma Yid. So he stayed a while, he was intrigued, he watched. He headed back to the yeshiva a little bit later on in the evening, Bedford and Dean, and there's no one there bar 1 or 2 people. Where is everybody? The Rebbe's Farbrengen. The Rebbe's Farbrengen. So my father ran to 770 as fast as he could, and he stood up on a chair. It was a small crowd. The Rebbe sees him, smiles, calls him by name, and tells him to say l'chaim, as he often did. And only then the Rebbe said, wie bald du gehst, wo man darf nicht, man guckt auf das, was man tar nicht, ist besser sagen l'chaim. Since you went to where you don't need to go and you looked upon that which you shouldn't really be looking upon, it's better to say l'chaim. What does the story teach me? That the Rebbe had incredible Ruach HaKodesh, on one level, certainly so. But more than that is the Rebbe's indescribable Avas Yisrael. You see, because when you really love somebody, when you embrace them wholeheartedly and you're so deeply connected to them, then regardless of distance, you're very much aware of where they are and you're absolutely attuned to them. And when it comes to a Nasi and a Nasi hu Hakol, then it's a deep nafshay kshura b'nafshay. The neshamas are inextricably linked, they're intertwined, and no matter the distance, if you're connected, then the Rebbe is with you every single step of the way. And what's key to appreciate again in this regard is that physical distance, social distance, it's irrelevant. If the Rebbe could be in one place and know what's going on in another place, nothing changes from then to now. And the bottom line is, the Rebbe told us Mashiach is coming. We know that the Cheshech itself is kofel and mechupel, all the more so just before as a prelude to the new Ar, to the new light. New normal. On the one hand, as per the Rambam, Eilam ki minhagei noheg. Initially, the world's going to carry on as normal, but it's going to be a new Ar, the radiance of Geula, a new reality, the arrival of Mashiach, the new normal. May we indeed be zeiche to this new normal, with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu and Esidarenu B'Roshenu B'Mheira U'B'Karayv Mamash now. Amen.